code name for Moderately Geeky's daring, meagerly trained special missions force. Its purpose, to entertain geekdom against Corona, a ruthless terrorizing virus determined to bore the world. These are the new adventures of Moderately Geeky. Welcome to Social Geekery. Now here's your host, the man with 5 POA on a good day, Jay Hunger.
That is a good day anymore. Hey guys, we are back. We're going to talk a little G.I. Joe, and then we're going to talk a little bit about books. We have an author on, a special author. He's a buddy of ours from the old G.I. Joe days. We're going to get to him in a second, but first we have Jason Reddick.
What's up, man?
We have Travis.
Howdy, all.
And again, I'm Jay. All right, so with us tonight, we have, like I said, we have a buddy from the old G.I. Joe days. He's not your typical Joe fan. He actually has some some knowledge in the field, and he also
wait
a
for
writer.
Ross.
So welcome on to the show. We have Justin Bell.
How you doing, guys?
Welcome on. I'm glad you're on. I've wanted to talk to you about the whole G.I. Joe movement and how things are changing, the movie world and all of that. But you also have a hobby of writing, and you've got several books out, so we want to look at that as well. But before we do that, let's bounce back to Travis to get the show going.
All right, guys. Yeah, let's talk a little G.I. Joe. I know all of us come from that G.I. Joe background. I think most of us interacted and started meeting one another online almost 20 years ago, maybe more than 20 years. For a lot of us, back to the Sergeant Sound or Savage Sound Off. What was that board? Sergeant Savage Sound Off.
Before
right?
that, it was Devil's Due, right?
Yeah, Devil's Due Press. Yeah, that was the original one, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a long time, but we're in a period where G.I. Joe appears to be making yet another comeback. I mean, it really is kind of the phoenix of the toy world. It rises to prominence, dies off, and then comes back a few years later. And so two of the big things coming up, we've got the movie, Snake Eyes. I guess let's start with that. Just a real quick, are you guys looking forward to it, or are you scared to go see what it is? What's your expectations? Justin, you're the guest. Why don't we start with you? What do you think of the new movie coming out?
I'm pretty excited for it. I'm one of those guys that G.I. Joe is in my blood. I've been a fan since 1982 and never really stopped. A lot of folks kind of took a break during high school to pursue other avenues, but I've been with G.I. Joe all along the way in all its different iterations. And the Snake Eyes movie just looks like a whole lot of fun. I think the best thing about the film, in my eyes at this point, is they kind of have a plan. They know what they're doing. It's not like Rise of Cobra, where it was the director had kind of a pre-existing movie in mind and they just kind of wrapped G.I. Joe around it. This actually seems like something they're really thinking about. They've established kind of what it's about, and it's got some, pretty high-profile star attached to it. So, I'm excited. And anytime G.I. Joe is in the mainstream media, anytime G.I. Joe is a household name, I think it's a good thing. So I'm pretty excited to see what they do.
Cool. How about you, Jay?
I'd like to think positively that it's going to be a good experience. Like, I'm not fooling anybody. The first two movies that they released, just the fact that they released G.I. Joe movies just made me happy anyway. They're not, works of art by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that we saw a Snake Eyes, a Storm Shadow in live action, I mean, it just made the little kid in me happy. For this, I don't know. I kind of wonder if it's wrong to take G.I. Joe too seriously. I know the older fans and all of us want that. They want that military, futuristic kind of story. But is that best for the brand? You know what I mean? I don't know. And coming from a toy-driven line, I don't know. But in terms of what we're getting here, Snake Eyes, I can honestly say I don't know enough to be, to feel one way or another other than hopeful.
Yeah. What do you think, Jason?
So we tried campy with the last two movies, and no, I mean, did they turn a profit? I don't remember if they turned a profit at the box office. Does anybody remember?
The first one did enough to get a
It
sequel.
wasn't,
Well, that's
yeah,
true. I
it
guess
wasn't
you get a
huge,
sequel
but they
to that.
did. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it
When
was
you
mixed
factor in
reviews.
international box office, I think they did. Yeah.
Okay, so and then you had mixed reviews. The fans had, depending on who you asked, the reaction. I don't know if I want a serious judgment because we have serious war movies. So it's like it's got to fall somewhere between campy and fun and serious. And I think it's a very delicate balance, especially the material, the political environment we're in today. I think going with more of the Ninja Snake Eyes Storm Shadow route is probably the safe bet right now, consider all things considered. So, but
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I'd like to see a great G.I. Joe movie. I want to take something to my kids to see that I grew up playing with and say, hey, this is what Dad played with. This is what I grew up enjoying. Although they already got some of that. Leave that on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, you put me in the camp of I'm excited for it. I want it to succeed. I want it to be good. I don't ever want to pay money and go see a bad movie. I don't go into a movie looking for it to fail. I don't understand that mindset that a lot of culture has, but I agree. Snake Eyes is the way to go. He's always been the most popular, the most culturally relevant, if you will, piece of G.I. Joe. And if they can get him and focus on him, great. If we can throw in, the Baroness and maybe sprinkle in Cobra Commander and build towards something else, hey, fantastic. But I agree. I don't want it serious, but I don't necessarily think it has to be campy to be fun. I mean, if you look at, the Marvel movies, just to, take the big example, you can have fun and you can have action. And I think I was watching Taika Waititi on something. Oh, it was the Mandalorian documentary where he talked about humor and action. It's like you can have action and get the humor out of action pieces without making fun of the action. That it can still be action driven while having humor in it. And I think not just G.I. Joe, but any action piece, that's kind of where culture is right now. We don't need blood and gore and uber seriousness. We want to have fun at the movies, just like G.I. Joe should be a fun.
We want to lean more
toy.
towards Marvel than DC, basically.
If you want to go that way, but there were pieces of the first two movies that I think really worked well, and one of those was Snake Eyes. I think in both of the movies, they handled him pretty well. So if nothing else, I think it proves it can work. We'll see if it does or not, I guess. But I know for us, the movie's great, but the toys were always a real draw, and so we have toys again. We have G.I. Joe toys, albeit in a different scale. We've gone from 12-inch to 3 3/4 inch to 4-inch to 8-inch to 4-inch, now back to 6-inch. You guys excited? Is it good? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do you think?
There's a dirty joke in there somewhere too.
There is. If you're talking Jay, he's micro scale, Joe's. So, but I think I know where most of you are going to fall on this, but are you excited for the 6-inch Joe's coming out? Jay, let's start with you.
They look gorgeous as action figures. They look amazing. To take that 4-inch scale that we all know and we've all collected and add a little bit more detail just because they have the room to do it now. I think it will only improve the figures. Now that said, I don't have the Snake Eyes yet. Travis, I know that you do, and you like it a lot. And Justin, you have the figure as well, correct?
Yeah, I've got the Snake Eyes yet.
Yeah, so, and you're pretty positive too, right?
Oh, yeah, I love it. I think they're doing a great job, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't think it was so much a risk to take it to, for lack of a better term, the Marvel Legends scale with the style that they're doing. right? I mean, it's a pretty
Yeah.
safe bet. I mean, it's not like they were doing the Sigma 6 figures again, where it was just a complete warp of, not necessarily, or necessarily, depending on how you want to look at it, a bad change of character. I mean, it's still the Snake Eyes that we know. It's just a little bit bigger now.
Justin, what are your thoughts? You've got the Snake Eyes in hand. I think it's a gorgeous piece. I think it's one of the best toys I've held in hand in quite a while. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, the Snake Eyes has really impressed me so far. And the images that we've seen of some of the others, I'm pretty impressed with them as well. I think, Jay brought up a great point about 6-inch being a safe bet. I don't think it was much of a risk. And especially seeing some of the reactions, like this is the first time in a long time that I've seen a lot of non-G.I. Joe fans excited about G.I. Joe. I mean, I've seen a bunch of YouTube reviewers who are fawning all over the 6-inch G.I. Joe stuff. I've got, there's people paying crazy money for this stuff on eBay before it hits retail, which isn't something we've always seen in the G.I. Joe world. So there seems to be a lot of cross-platform appeal. People that normally were focused on Marvel Legends and those kinds of figures are actually showing G.I. Joe some love and getting some good publicity out of it. So I think it was a good move, I think, on Hasbro's part to go to the 6-inch scale and to appeal to some of those demographics, because a lot of those people that are around our age or maybe even a little bit younger who are G.I. Joe fans, they only collect 6-inch figures. They love Marvel Legends, and being able to get a Duke or a Snake Eyes or a Destro that works with their Marvel Legends figures is, a dream come true. It's something they've never had. I mean, for all the different scales Hasbro has done, 6-inch has not been one of them for G.I. Joe. So this is it's breaking new ground, but also kind of being safe at the same time.
Yeah, Jason, what do you think? You like the 6-inch scale?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've kind of converted over to 6-inch scale figures a while back when Master Universe went that way. I picked up some Marvel Legends over the years, or whatever they've converted to. Are they still Marvel Legends, or they changed the name to just something else?
No, they're still Legends.
There's some Star Wars Black figures they're planning on picking up pretty soon here. What I'm excited about is the fact that I have Snake Eyes in the same scale as my He-Man, as my Lion-O, as my Luke Skywalker. You get where you go. It's like it's starting to all kind of fall into a standard scale. And I know this is like a drink shot and like probably never, but a 6-inch scale Sky Striker, I mean, you laugh.
All right,
well, look what's behind me.
If the TIE Fighter didn't sell, they're not making a Sky Striker. Sorry.
They made a snow speeder.
They did. They did. And I look forward to getting that on clearance. So, from my perspective is I'm all for it. I think G.I. Joe has always been a property that changes with the time. That's what's made it timeless. That's what's made it so good that you can take an idea, a property, and tweak it. You can adventure team it. You can do whatever needs to be done
Extreme.
to reach whatever audience. Extreme! But I have no problem with it. I think what's interesting about this iteration is that G.I. Joe historically was kind of on the forefront of a scale shift. They brought boys' toys into 12-inch, the action figure they invented. They brought the scale and made articulation work in 1/18th scale. They were usually the forerunners for everything else switching to that. This time they're on the tail end. The scale's already been worked out. Marvel Legends, Black. I've said before, I think the design of the G.I. Joe figures owe an awful lot to the Overwatch line and the Power Rangers line that Hasbro did just prior to it. There's a lot of the joints and articulation and sculpting that is very similar in those lines. And so I'm really excited to see what Joe does, if you will, with a head start this time, that they don't necessarily have to figure everything out. They can just use stuff that's already worked in other places and say, hey, we can do this and make a killer Destro, But one of the big battles in the toy world right now is this idea of collector versus kid driven. And G.I. Joe's always kind of walked that line of trying to appeal to both collectors, both kids, sometimes more one way, sometimes more the other. Do you guys think the 6-inch line's better off focusing on trying to get new audience in, whether it's kids or outside collectors, or should they cater more to the the collector market, those fans of GI Joe that are already there. Jay, what do you think?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. Ever since mid 2000s, I've always said that if they want GI Joe to succeed, to prosper, is to forego the adult collectors. I don't know if that's the self-loathing in me or what, but I think it always should have been focused on the kids. And if the adult collectors were to tag along, even better for it. But the reason I say that is it's always been a store-driven toy, right? So it's never had a huge collector fan base like a Star Wars or like, I don't know, Star Trek or even Marvel, something like that. That's always had this carry on with the adult collector. Well, that was just one of the things I could think of. But the point is, they've always wanted to see GI Joe on the shelves, in the stores, and I mean, we've had some luck as adult collectors seeing some of the toys in the aisles. But I think they really need to really, focus on the kid-driven, just so they can buy it, so they can bug their parents to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
But flip side, though, my kids, they're 11 and 13. They want nothing to do with action figures, with toys. They want video games. So I don't know where that falls in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Justin, what do you think on this dichotomy between collectors and kids?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I think historically, G.I. Joe has always found that interesting kind of marriage between the two, where they could appeal to kids yet still appeal to older collectors as well. I don't know if that dichotomy exists anymore. And Jay brings up a great point. I mean, I have a younger daughter. She's 10 years old, and she still kind of buys the occasional. I mean, she likes the Frozen dolls, but she also loves the How to Train Your Dragon series, and she's bought some of those action figures. But she'll buy one of those action figures and she'll play with it for 20 minutes and then go on her tablet and do Minecraft for 3 hours. So I mean, it's interesting because there is a different mentality with kids these days. I think there's probably room for both. I mean, selfishly, I like it when Hasbro caters to the collectors to a degree. But G.I. Joe, we're getting long in the tooth here. If G.I. Joe is going to exist and kind of keep being relevant and popular, they need to figure out a way to appeal to younger audiences. And 6-inch figures probably is not going to do that. So they've got to find some way to appeal to kids as well. And that's difficult these days, especially with the cost of manufacturing toys, when you really can't do a highly articulated 4-inch action figure and release it for $2.99 at the local department store. So I mean, that almost automatically kind of carves out the kid market, because when I was 8 or 10 years old, I wasn't saving up $12.99 to buy an action figure at the department store. I was getting it for $3 when I happened to be in there with my mom. So I mean, it's tough these days to find that middle ground. So you're either making 5 POA hunks of plastic that really aren't a whole lot of fun and trying to get 10-year-olds to buy those, or you're doing much more expensive, highly articulated figures that might be either out of their price range or may not appeal to them for other reasons. So it's difficult. And I think G.I. Joe isn't unique to that. I mean, I think Hasbro has really struggled with that. You've seen a lot of lines over the years with the Marvel movies, trying to appeal to both. And you can kind of see the trends where Hasbro's been focusing a lot more attention, as far as I can tell, on the 6-inch scale in Marvel Legends, and you're not seeing so many of those 5-inch, or 5 POA kind of smaller figures at all. You see the 12-inch kind of really rigid statue things that are totally bargain basement, and then you see Marvel Legends, and that's really the primary avenues. You don't see a whole lot of other stuff. So I don't think G.I. Joe's unique to that. I think toy manufacturers everywhere are trying to figure out how to handle that. And you're right. I mean, I don't know how much longer action figures are going to be a viable market to the younger generation. It's a tough call.
Yeah, Jason, any thoughts?
So I think this is just a general problem, more with boys' toys and girls' toys, and you can see it in the toy aisles, especially if you paid attention over the last 10 or 15 years. I think back in 2005, I was saying the reason why we're not seeing toys on the shelves in the boys market is because the attention's just moved to video games, especially now that you have online gaming. I think it drew much more attention. It drew the kids money where they want to spend it. My son, when he gets it, he's a saver, but when he actually does spend money on something, usually he's buying a video game. Occasionally he'll get some little Minecraft figures or he'll get some Legos, but he's got so many Lego sets, he's kind of lost a little interest there too. He does still play with toys. He still plays with action figures. They play with the Master Universe stuff. My daughter, who's 10 too, she still buys toys and plays with them, but she will play games too. So I do think that they need to hit the child market. I think that there probably needs to be some kind of consideration with the gaming market. I don't know if it would be pairing up with like a developer in Fortnite or something and start introducing skins, because kids like to buy the skin, the action figure or the model of whatever was in one of their favorite games. I have some friends that are in their early 20s and they're kind of getting to where they're trying to collect action figures of the games they used to play, to have something tangible there, something they grew up with, because they're growing up with nothing tangible to go back to nostalgia-wise other than a disc or a cartridge. Having your character that you end up growing up playing, to be able to have that on your hand or have it on your desk at home or at work, there's a difference there. But then you start kind of getting into the collector things. I think it's a careful balance. I don't think there's one way or another with this. Especially, I don't think G.I. Joe is a one way or other with their toys.
Yeah, I know. I've got a 6 and 11-year-old boy, so they're kind of right in that prime toy playing era. But they're completely media driven. I mean, they will play with whatever they're interested in for media. They're all about Star Wars this week because we've been watching Star Wars movies, watching Clone Wars. My kid also wants to play Battlefront right now because he's big into Star Wars. The youngest, it's Pokemon. He wants the toys, the cards, all that. And I think if you're going to reach kids, it's completely media driven. Whether it's video games or cartoons or movies, you got to get them in. I know the Voltron cartoon on Netflix, when that hit, man, my kids ate that up. They bought sweatshirts and toys, and they really jumped hard into that. But I think if G.I. Joe is going to get kids, maybe it's the movie, and that may be our best hope that just goes gangbusters, and then we can get a cartoon or a video game or something to tie in there and go from there. But yeah, I don't know if they can figure out how to make it work.
Sorry.
Go ahead. What was that, Jason?
I mean, my daughter latched on. The She-Ra toys were short-lived, and they were actually good dolls. It's really sad, but she latched onto them when they hit market. She wanted them, and then one day, just out of nowhere, I surprised her with them. After school, it's like I got her Glimmer and She-Ra, and she plays with them. I mean, like I said, you've got to get them. Like you said, they're tuned into the media, and if you can find a way to market through that media, like I said, Fortnite's a perfect example because one, the characters are cartoony. We know they can introduce licensed models because they've done it with Marvel and they've done it with Star Wars. I really think it's a good avenue to go to start marketing G.I. Joe to kids.
Sure. As we kind of wind down this G.I. Joe talk here a little bit, what do you think Hasbro needs to do? One positive thing in order for the line to succeed, thinking of the toy line itself, and what's something they need to avoid doing in order to either not fail or to succeed? What do you think could be a potential landmine, so to speak, coming down the road? Justin, why don't we start with you this time?
Well, I think one thing they need to do is something we kind of already talked about was, appeal to kids. And part of that, unfortunately, is going to be kind of deciding what they want G.I. Joe to be. I mean, they've kind of walked that line between military, superhero, adventurer, whatever. They've got to figure out what he is and really, focus in on that. I think they're kind of doing that with Snake Eyes a little bit with the Ninja story, but, to some degree, I think they've got to make that decision and say, this is what G.I. Joe is going to represent. This is what this is what it is. And I think part of also ties into what they need to avoid doing, and we kind of talked about this as well, is they need to avoid going back to the well. I mean, you know, you can only revisit concepts from 1982 so often before they become totally irrelevant in 2020. And so I think they just really need to kind of soup to nuts, you know, find that core that makes G.I. Joe what it is. And, you know, sorry, adult collectors, it's not Delta Force, you know, 50 caliber machine guns and shooting up mass terrorists. I mean, there's other avenues there that you can kind of explore. So, I mean, they need to find what that is and really, you know, find the right marriage between the brand and kind of the direction they want it to go in, and something that can appeal to kids and parents and can kind of carry G.I. Joe to the next, you know, generation.
Yeah, Jay, what do you think?
Honestly, it's going to be a hard sell, because they're not really the superhero. They're supposed to be the standard Joe, action hero, you know, soldier. I honestly still say that they've got to cater to kids at all costs. If that means to you know, alienate some of the older fans, I mean, it just has to be done for survival of the line. I don't know if there's any tips or tricks that they can do that they haven't done now. I don't know. It's so weird for action figures now, especially with things going on in the world and stuff like that. I think that would be the best for the line, though, is just to cater to the kids.
Okay, Jason.
So I mean, I kind of already stated it. You know, you got to get in there with the media.
Sure.
Go in the wrong direction. You know, collectors had their chance. I don't know the details. I'm not going to speculate on the details, but they had a chance at the Collectors Club to put their money where their mouth was with all this. Instead, most people, myself included, spent time complaining and not realizing you had this great opportunity. Didn't always like the quality, didn't always like the choices, but it was there. Now you don't have it. How do you feel about that? So,
yeah,
I, you know, like what Jay said, right now, I don't think the hardline military is the route to go. Like Justin said, gun down terrorists for 50 cals is just, that's just not something I even want to watch, you know, unless I'm playing a video game. I don't want to see that in a media, especially marketed to kids these days. It's just, like I said earlier, the political climate. You've got to be really careful with this material.
Yeah. Now, to me, looking at more logistics side, if they can get distribution kind of ironed out and not fall into some of the stuff that's happened in the past where they make something extremely hard to find, and even in Marvel Legends, occasionally you'll find that something that's really difficult to find, but if they can keep distribution like they've done more recently in some of their other lines where things are easy to find, there's pretty even case pack outs, I think that'll go a long ways. As far as things that they need to avoid, I'll echo what a lot of you guys have said. I think they have to be very careful about just becoming another whatever anniversary this is line where it's just let's release 1982 through 85 product exactly as it was, and we're going to cater to this really loud segment of collectors that will buy 1,000 pieces of stuff and no one else will. I want to see something new. I want to see something imaginative. I want to see G.I. Joe. What makes G.I. Joe, I think G.I. Joe is catering to where it is here and now, not to the 1980s again. So anyways, just to close out the G.I. Joe segment, what would be your ideal exclusive? So if, let's say you were in charge of Hasbro and you were able to come up with a 2021 SDCC exclusive that was with the 6-inch G.I. Joes, trying to keep it realistic because I know Jason's going to say a flag.
No.
Basically, it's building a house and can build a room around it, right? But what do you think would be the ideal San Diego exclusive Joe item? Jay, let's start with you.
I wouldn't go Joe. I'd actually go maybe Cobra. I would say a smaller vehicle like a Thing. It's still a classic, well-known vehicle. It's fun. It's simple. It's not big, and you could, carry around a couple figures on it. So you have a driver and a guy standing on the rails. Or if we want to do G.I. Joe, realistically, I think your best bet would be like a Dragonfly or something like that. So
That'd be
yeah,
huge.
that's what I go with.
All right, Justin, what do you think?
I'd probably stick with figures. I know Hasbro's had some luck with some of like 6-inch multi-packs. Maybe, I don't know, if they end up doing, like you've seen, we've all seen the artwork on the back of the classified box and seen a battle helmet Cobra Commander. Maybe they do a hooded Cobra Commander, maybe come with a couple of Cobra officers or something like that. I mean, I think they need to keep it simple because, it's still pretty early in the line, and I think that would be relatively easy. Maybe give him a nice kind of soft goods cape or something and a nicely sculpted hood, kind of a deluxe version of Cobra Commander or something like that adds a little bit of
You
flair.
can give him the podium again.
The podium?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, but you'd see like a Cobra Commander with a throne? That would be pretty wicked.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, nice snake thing, snake-themed throne. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
We've never actually gotten a marketed Cobra throne, have we?
I don't think so.
Was there one in that?
Not really. I mean, they did that Toys R Us set, way back when, and they had those like junky little Star Wars repainted kind of half gold and red chairs, but those don't count.
Right.
Yeah, no. Somehow we got a Skeletor throne coming, but we never got a Cobra throne for G.I. Joe. It's unfortunate. To the San Diego Comic-Con thing, I've never liked my Comic-Con exclusives being like an essential thing. It's always been one thing that drove me crazy. The Master Universe line, so occasionally they'd have something that would be pretty big to even the casual collector. I think variants and not really super big variants is probably the way to go with that. Not something that people are going to really freak out over because they have to pay now $100 for what essentially is a $12, $15 figure. So I think variants are a good way to go. Ideally, what I'd like to see would be like a vamp and clutch, something like that, but that's never going to happen. So, and that would also not be a variant and probably would drive collectors nuts trying to get their hands on it. So,
yeah, I'm tempted because I just like to watch the internet burn and Joe fans get angsty, make something really popular in very limited numbers, type of thing. But I could see doing, going the figure route, either like maybe a Baroness and Lady J like disguise pack or something where they come with a disguise or something, or maybe something along the lines of Snake Eyes and Shipwreck in their cartoon disguises when they're trying to escape the Boy George and the wig and all that.
Nice.
I think that'd be a good one. But anyways, I'm excited to see where it goes. It's fun to be excited for G.I. toys again. So hopefully it leads to a good thing. Jay, why don't you take us from here?
Okay. Well, honestly, I meant for the G.I. Joe portion of this to be a little bit littler than it was, but it just kind of dominated the conversation here. So much so that I got a little excited. I wanted to jump into the whole G.I. Joe topic without really introducing you, Justin. If you would, could you just talk a little bit about your background and where you came from and kind of what your interests are, what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I bought my first G.I. Joe figure in 1982. It was a straight-armed Flash and Cobra at a local department store. And ever since then, you could say it's been all downhill from there. But I never really stopped. And I'd always bought toys kind of in and out of that, 80s to 90s period. But for some reason, G.I. Joe was the one that I had to have them all. For whatever, I just felt compelled to own every single one of them. So from that point, pretty much, and I didn't have everything until probably the mid to late 90s, and just kept on collecting, and then discovered the internet as most people did, in the mid to late 90s, and was blown away because up until that point I was buying Tomart's and Lee's action figure magazines, and flipping through the back pages and looking for stores that I could mail checks to or order over the phone for those figures that I couldn't find. Having not much luck with that, and then all of a sudden, here's eBay and here's these message boards and all these different places you can talk to people and trade and buy, and the whole world just kind of opened up and it just went crazy. And at some point in the late 90s, there was a new G.I. Joe, well, it was into 2000, where a new G.I. Joe line was appearing at Toys R Us. There was 2-packs. Kind of the Real American Hero collection kind of made its debut. And and actually, it wasn't just Toys R Us. It was, they had the Toys R Us exclusives from 97 to 98. And then in 2000, it kind of went more wide. And I was actually, in these little message boards that we were on, I was one of the first people to find them at retail. And a lot of people were like, oh, how are they? How are they? So, in around the year 2000, I decided, well, I'll post a couple pictures on a website and I'll talk about them and kind of see what people think. And I posted my first reviews on an old Angel Fire website back in 2000. And things just kind of took off from there. Yeah. So, and I also used that site to post a couple pictures of custom figures I was doing. There was another couple of websites back then. A couple of members of the Joe Customs message boards were doing what they call Dio Stories, which are little comic sort of books with action figures instead of actual drawings. And I thought that was kind of neat. So I started poking around in some of that stuff too. And then all of a sudden, I'd done reviews and Dio Stories for 15 years, and it kind of dominated my site. And in 2009, generalsjoes.com, which was kind of the place where I did these reviews and these Dio Stories, started covering news with the original Rise of Cobra movie. I started covering a little bit of news stuff, and I've backed off from the news a little bit just because I don't have quite as much time to keep up these days. But yeah, generalsjoes.com was kind of been, I went to JoeCon with the Toy Fair, covered San Diego Comic-Con, tried to cover all the different shows, all the different news events that were happening. Just got really invested in the community and really enjoyed it. And G.I. Joe more or less dominated my life for 20 years. So, I've got a very strong attachment to the brand. I love it. It's gotten me the opportunity to meet some great people. I've had a chance to interview John Chu, the director of G.I. Joe Retaliation, to meet some really great people at different Joe Cons, become friends with all of you guys, a bunch of other Joe fans around the world as well. So it's been a really fantastic experience for me for around 20 to 25 years. I never would have thought back in, the mid 80s or 90s, when I was the only uncool high school kid still buying action figures, that, something like this could really, really affect my life in that way. So, so these days, I'm still an action figure collector. Obviously G.I. Joe has been gone from retail for a while, so I haven't been diving into that a whole lot, but I still buy a lot of other action figures. I do the occasional review on generalsjoes.com, and I am really excited for G.I. Joe Classified, the 6-inch line, to kind of hit, full speed, because I'm loving Snake Eyes, and the rest of the figures look great too. And interestingly, I mean, G.I. Joe is really kind of, like I said, it's been an inspiration, and it's kind of shaped the next stage of sort of my hobby life as an author. It's a lot of what I've done in my author career has been a direct result of my experiences with G.I. Joe. So really, it sounds kind of silly to say, well, a toy line kind of changed my life, but it did. I don't really know how else to put it, because what I experienced.
When you started writing more so, you started basically with G.I. Joe stories, right, on Kindle Works, is that correct?
Yeah, interestingly, I actually, in the kind of early 2000s, I mentioned I was writing Dio Stories, and kind of as part of that Dio Story thing, I actually wrote, a fanfic, basically a G.I. Joe book called The Price of Peace, which kind of told, the Dio Stories take place in, so-called present time in 2000, when I bought the action figures, the Dio Stories were kind of picking up at that time frame. So I wrote this book called The Price of Peace, which was supposed to go back to, 1995, when the team disbanded, and kind of fill in some of those gaps, talk about what happened between then and now. And I've always loved writing, for as long as I can remember. And The Price of Peace was the first time I ever wrote and finished a novel-sized book. It was the first, kind of novel that I really wrote. And originally it was for visitors to my website. I would post a chapter, every week or two on my website, and people would come read it and enjoy it. And so I did it for myself. And then I think it was around 2012, maybe even before then, I don't know, Amazon announced a partnership with Hasbro where they were allowing independent authors to write G.I. Joe fiction and post it on, on Amazon and actually sell it for money. And I was like, wow, that's pretty neat.
That was a,
So
kind
I
of
actually,
a weird thing. Kind of an awesome thing,
Yeah.
but just kind of a weird thing for them to do, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Kindle Worlds program had a lot of different universes that you could write in. I think, interestingly, G.I. Joe was probably the highest profile.
Really?
I'm not sure how they made. Yeah, I mean, there was like, I'm trying to remember what else there was. There was some like independent authors who had written their own books that had contracts with Amazon, like Russell Blake, who's an author, wrote a series called Jet. You could write in that universe, and there was Hugh Howey, I think, had a universe that you could write in. Different things like that. But G.I. Joe was like a really identifiable property. And so I kind of went back to my Price of Peace novel, dug through it, rewrote it, and kind of reformatted it and published it as a trilogy on Amazon. And that kind of led to a couple of other short stories. I worked with some other independent authors, G.I. Joe authors, and did some little series work, where I would tell one story. Jim Beard would tell a story, Troy Osgood would tell a story, Bill Nedrow would tell a story, and they'd all kind of tie together. So yeah, we formed a pretty tight knit community of those guys, and of course, that was the first, my first opportunity to really say, I can actually write a book. And then in 2014, kind of jumping off from that experience, every year in November, they have something called National Novel Writers Month, which is dedicated to kind of people who have been struggling to write a book. That's kind of, you can log into a website and log your daily words and kind of get motivated by the community and try to spurn yourself to write. And in 2013, I completed an entire novel in November by participating in that, and a non-G.I. Joe novel. And for the first time, I was kind of like, I can actually do this. So at that point, I published that novel, wrote its sequel and published that the year after. I wrote the third book and published that the year after that, and discovered, kind of as I published that third book, and, it's the typical thing, you write a book, you throw it on Amazon, you're sitting there going, okay, show me the money. And, you don't sell anything. Nobody knows about it. I had some friends bought some, but, it wasn't really returning anything. So I'm like, well, what can I do to broaden my exposure? So I started doing a little bit of research about being an independent author and like what it really takes. Joined some Facebook groups and kind of learned the ins and outs of the publishing world a little bit. And it was about, 6 or 8 months after I published that third book where I got connected to a small publishing house in Mississippi called Moanic Press, who was looking for authors to kind of collaborate with, who specialize in post-apocalyptic thrillers and sci-fi fiction. And so I got connected with Moanic Press at that point. They liked my stuff and they liked my writing style and thought I might be a good fit. And I sent them some samples. We talked back and forth for a while and finally signed a contract for a 6-book series. And that was, I think, in 2018 that I published that first 6-book series. And it's been pretty much going ever since. I've been finding ways to kind of increase my productivity, to write more words, to publish more books, and they seem to be getting some really warm receptions from the post-apocalyptic audience. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much kind of taken over any of my hobby time that I had. Anytime you don't see a post on generalsjoes.com or generalsjoesreborn.com, it's because I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning writing 10,000 words in my latest book. is pretty much the reason.
So, all right. So I knew that you did the Kindle Works stories. I knew you published through that. But my first real experience with you writing was your Kickstarter that you did.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What was that, 2016? Or is it longer?
I think that was, 16 or 17, something like that, yeah.
Okay. So, and me and my wife, we both pledged and we both got the books and stuff and we read it. And,
awesome.
So that's where I first knew of your writing, and that was Duck, Duck, Goose, right? Yep. Okay. So just to follow on that, have you followed up with any more of her stories?
I have. We're hoping to kind of have a pretty exciting announcement on that plan shortly. I've actually got 3 books written in the Goose series at this point. we're trying to find, and I keep on saying we, and that's because Milanic Press has taken a look at that and actually really enjoys that too. And I may be partnering with them to kind of relaunch Duck Duck Goose, hopefully sometime soon. We're actually going to do it this year. Interestingly, the whole pandemic situation is, it's had the ripple effects are pretty much everywhere, and including in the book publishing world. So we're trying to kind of figure out the best avenue to kind of relaunch that series. I love that series, and I've got 3 books written right now. I think it's some of the best work I've done, and kind of depending how the next couple of months shake out, I'm hoping to have some more word about that shortly. But yeah, that's one of my favorite universes to write in is the kind of the Duck Duck Goose world, and I should be getting more of that stuff out very soon.
Okay. So as a creator, you're writing post-apocalyptic, you're writing this crime novel, police drama with Goose. Do you find it hard to not do same elements in both of your writing, or is it just like a black and white, or when you're in one world, you're in one world and you're stuck in that, same box? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It can be tough. So I try. I know a lot of authors who will kind of jump around. They'll write one chapter of one book, one chapter of another book, and I don't do that. I sit there and I say, okay, I'm starting chapter 1 of my latest post-apocalyptic. I'm going to write that until I'm at the end. Then put that aside, put that the next stage. Go to the beta readers, my editor or whatever, and then I'm going to write this other book. And if I do it that way, it works pretty well. I'm able to kind of compartmentalize a little bit better. It does help a little bit in that. When I'm writing the post-apocalyptic stuff, it's usually kind of end of the world scenario, very dramatic things are happening that don't necessarily carry over to like a Duck Duck Goose series. So I can usually create that separation by, nuclear bombs haven't gone off in the Duck Duck Goose universe. So I don't have to let that cross over, but there is definitely I get concerned sometimes because at this point I've published over 40 novels, and I get a little worried that, are these characters going to be cardboard cutouts? I don't want that to happen. I don't want this character in a Duck Duck Goose novel to be able to be picked up and carried and dropped here and be the same person. Each person is kind of impacted by their surroundings. And I spend a lot of time, before I even write the book, kind of getting to know the characters. There's lots of people, there's more than 2 types of writers, but 2 major types of writers. There's what's called plotters and what's called pantsers. And the plotters are the people that sit down and say, this is how the story is going to go, and adhere to that. And the pantsers are people, they're called pantsers because they write by the seat of their pants. They just kind of sit down and start writing and see where things go. I'm a plotter. So I take my time kind of before I start the book, and I organize my characters, I organize my thoughts, and I say, this is who this person is, and try to make sure at that point that this person here is not this person. It's their own person. And it can be challenging sometimes, but I try to get all their backstory in my head before I start writing the book, just so I can get an idea of how they act and make sure that's consistent across all of their different adventures.
So as a creator, again, you're kind of playing in 2 completely different sandboxes. One is bound by real world rules and normalcy, things that we know. The other one is, I guess we're getting a taste of right now, post-apocalyptic and stuff. So as a creator, which do you find more challenging to work with? Where you have rules and sense of normalcy, or where anything goes because you've established that world?
Yeah, I found the post-apocalyptic stuff to be very challenging, and the biggest, and in a good way. I enjoy the challenge. Part of it is because we try very hard not to fall into some of the typical kind of post-apocalyptic traps. We have pledged there will be no zombie stories, so we don't do any post-apocalyptic zombie stories. So zombies are immediately written off. Obviously, right now we're trying to stay away from pandemic stories for obvious reasons. Some people I think might be capitalizing on it. We're trying not to capitalize on it. We're trying to be respectful of what's going on. So we're not going to do that. We're not doing alien invasion stuff. We're trying to keep it somewhat real world, and that can be tough, finding all these different ways for the world to end. It's all sorts of cheerful thoughts you have. But it goes back to, you know, me being inspired by G.I. Joe. I mean, I wrote a series last year called Heaven's Fist, which was about orbital satellites that fire, you know, the rods from God, the satellites that fire rails down to Earth, kind of like G.I. Joe Retaliation. And I kind of took that theory and said, well, what if somebody hacked this network of satellites and just started pummeling the Earth with these titanium rods? You know, what would happen? And that's what kind of spearheaded the end of the world in that particular situation. So yeah, it's really kind of picking and choosing all these different events, and you try to keep it realistic. But at the same time, you can loosen things a little bit, which gives me a little bit of freedom, but it's challenging because you need to keep readers invested and interested, and a lot of what drives them is kind of what has caused this phenomenon. And, you know, post-apocalyptic, I never knew this before I started writing it. It is a huge genre. Yeah. And there's a lot of books released all the time, and you're really struggling to kind of stay above the crowd. I mean, there's, you go to Amazon and EMP, these electromagnetic pulse books are everywhere. I mean, every author has done an EMP book. So we try to stay away from EMPs. So because we're staying away from these big, huge buckets of post-apocalyptic stuff, it makes it a little bit tough to find where our niche is. But, you know, it's worked pretty well so far.
Do you find that these post-apocalyptic basis stories come in waves, like you were saying, zombies? Like there's a wave of zombie books, a wave of EMP blast books, you know, the pandemic books. You find that, so it's got to be rough to figure out if you want to ride the wave or if you want to kind of differentiate yourself from that.
It's a tough thing, and it's something that people don't really know about independent authors, is that we're not just authors. We also have to be kind of researchers and marketers and kind of study trends and figure out if it's an appropriate time to get on that wave. It's like surfing. You got to find that wave at the right crest. You know, you find it too early or you don't hit it just right and you're going to wipe out. But if you find the right crest to ride at the right time, you can really do some good things. But at the same time, you don't want to be one of the crowd. You don't want to say, okay, well, there's another EMP book, you know, let's check this one out. You got to do something to separate yourself. So it's difficult. And you're right there. I mean, after The Walking Dead came out, everything was zombies. You know, Walking Dead and World War Z and all that stuff just spawned dozens and dozens and dozens of zombie books, and they're still out there and they still sell fairly well. So I mean, it's more of a creative philosophy of wanting to stay away from that more than anything else. But there's, you know, it's tough because there certainly are those trends, and you want to take advantage of them, but you don't want to be lost in the crowd.
Okay, so we have mentioned several of your books. So let's talk about some that you have for sale, like on Amazon. So looks like you sent me a handful of links. We have some of the post-apocalyptic. Looks like we have some military-themed ones as well. If you were to suggest to a reader that's new to your work, where do you want them to start?
Honestly, I think the nice thing about the post-apocalyptic stuff we do is that they are relatively self-contained. Like, not each book is self-contained, but we have series. Like, you know, Darkness Rising is a 6-book series. You know, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's done. If I was to tell you what I wanted you to check out, Storm's Fury is probably my current leader in the clubhouse. Storm's Fury is my latest series. I think my writing has gotten better as time has gone on, and because it's kind of the most recent thing I've done, I think it's, you know, I'm very fond of it. I think the characters are really great, really rich. Anybody who enjoys the video game, The Last of Us, will hopefully enjoy it. It's kind of a love letter to that game. Anybody who's played that game will notice some very similar kind of characters and themes that kind of go alongside it. So I would heartily recommend checking out Storm's Fury. If you're not a fan of the post-apocalyptic stuff, I really love my Operation Harvest trilogy. You know, that's kind of the first 3 books that I wrote that weren't G.I. Joe. And I really enjoy those as well. But if I could pick out a single thing to start off on, I'd probably say Storm's Fury, which is it's book one of the latest series. I've got 3 books out on that series so far.
Okay. The correct answer is all of them, right?
Well, of course, yeah, of course. I mean, especially if you're Kindle Unlimited, just dive in and just keep on reading until your eyes bleed.
All right, for new writers out there, what would you say would be? What would your best advice for new writers to be?
Honestly, I think writing. Just, call yourself a writer. You got to sit down and write. That's going to be your best marketing tool, your best practice, your best technique. Kind of, it's just going to be to keep writing because, excuse me, I do a lot of writing, not so much talking. I got to wet my whistle. So that's all there is to it, is that you're never going to get better without practice. Same as playing a musical instrument, same as any of that stuff is you just got to keep on writing. And as far as, what you do after you've finished your first book, it really depends what your goals are. I mean, some people write for a hobby. They write because they want to be traditionally published. They write because they want to make money. And I would give different advice in each of those cases. But time and time again, the most kind of profound advice I ever heard is your best marketing is your next book. So I would say just write and write and write, and you will get better, and you will and the rest will come to you. And as soon as you've got a book or 2 or 3 under your belt, then maybe start looking at why aren't people buying these, what do I need to do to kind of get more visibility. But I think too many people forget that if you want to be a successful writer, you got to write. I mean, that's what it boils down to.
So, as a creator, one of the biggest highlights that I have is someone buying my work. I made some action figures a few years ago on 3D printer. People bought it. That was the biggest thing for me. You made a novel. You made several novels. People have bought your work. So what would be your, I don't know if goal is the right word, but what would be your accolade? You're like, okay, this is it. I feel good about all of this. You know what I mean? What would be your shining moment as a writer?
I've got a couple. I mean, first and foremost, one, I think I've had the very nice, very cool opportunity to write for a publishing house out of Australia called Cohesion Press, who have done a series of kind of military horror anthologies called Snafu. Some of those stories have been picked up by a Hollywood director, Tim Miller, and put into an animated series, the Love, Death, and Robots series on Netflix.
Such a great series.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, and I know a couple of people that got their stories selected for that series, and that would be like amazing if one of my work was considered for something like that. I would consider myself, that's definitely a big check mark. I'd love to see something that I wrote in animated form, film form, or whatever. That'd be a big thing. But probably my biggest goal at this point would be to be a full-time author. I mean, that really is what I would like to do. Is, I have a day job, which pays the bills and is great and allows me to work from home while this pandemic is going on. So, it's all good there. But if I could, support my family and support my life just by being an author, that would be probably the biggest goal I could come up with.
All right. Do you guys have anything before we start to wind down?
So is there other genres you looked at going to, or are you like kind of sticking with the military and into slightly dystopian books?
I've got all sorts of stuff. I mean, I wish I could turn off my faucet because I've got all sorts of things that go flying through my head on a daily basis. I can watch, or I can read one book and all of a sudden have 8 different story ideas. So I would love to get into science fiction. I've got some military science fiction stuff in my head, kind of pseudo alien Starship Trooper sort of stuff that I would really love to get down on paper. That's probably my biggest want. I have dabbled in lit RPG a little bit under a different name. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with lit RPG, but it's the concept of, you're digitized into a video game and you're kind of playing out a massively multiplayer RPG with stats and stuff like that. But it's kind of a fantasy novel written in a game with the gamers and stats mindset. I had a lot of fun doing that.
Like the old when you said that, I was thinking of like the old Choose Your Adventure books, but that makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, anybody who's seen the Ready Player One movie, that's sort of a lit RPG / gamelet kind of thing. It's that sort of thing. And so I had a lot of fun kind of exploring my fantasy roots by doing that, and would love to do more of that. And that's part of the reason why I would like to be a full-time author. I mean, it's another 40 hours a week that I could devote to writing some of these other books, and that would be heaven to me, would be able to do that full-time. But yeah, I'm open to all sorts of stuff. I've got the Goose books to cover kind of crime thriller. I've got a bunch more military sci-fi ideas in my head, or military thriller ideas in my head. And there's all sorts of stuff that I would love to get into.
Well, I'll back myself. I did end up doing it, but last year I started kind of interested in writing comedy stuff, and so I started keeping a little journal on my phone of like ideas that I thought were funny or things I came across. Because in my line of work, we see some crazy stuff, and sometimes it's absolutely hilarious.
No kidding. I can imagine.
So I kept like a little small journal on my phone. Do you do something like that where you kind of like, oh, that's a good idea, and do you keep like a notebook, or do you keep a journal on your phone where you kind of jot down ideas for later if you decide to use them?
Oh yeah. I've got a bunch of different note-taking techniques. I've got Google Docs spreadsheets. I've got Google Docs documents. I've got, or I use Google Keep sometimes if I'm really short on time. I do use a software system that's actually got a mobile app to write some of my stories. So sometimes I can even jot a quick note down in there. But yeah, I've always got, that's been the best thing about having a phone at your fingertips and not having to carry around a pad of paper. You can just, I can fire up my Apple mic and I can dictate something for 10 seconds and it becomes a note. And I use all sorts of different mechanisms to do that. You find inspiration everywhere.
Cool.
Travis, you got anything before we wind down?
No, I think in deference to time, maybe we'll just wind things up. We usually try to end the show with a positive note, so we want to answer the question. Name something this week that didn't suck, something that was good in this time of uncertainty and chaos and boredom. What's something that just didn't suck? Jay, give us something.
I don't know. It's been a kind of a quiet week this week. My boys are about done with school, so we can be less substitute teacher and more full-time worker. So that's a positive for us.
Sure.
So I found that I'm not the best of substitute teachers.
Jason, what didn't suck for you?
So we're building a house right now. We got most things, like got our granite picked out, our tile, our flooring. The house is painted, getting closer to move in. So that didn't suck. Started picking up more hours because we kind of dropped off of the hospital. We stopped doing elective surgeries and we started doing those again. So that's been a huge plus. So
there you go. Justin, something that didn't suck for you this week.
Well, we had a meeting virtual meeting for work a couple days ago where it was decided that the remote workplace thing is working so well, we may actually end up doing that full time. So that's even after things open back up, they're talking about keeping a lot of people remote, which would be very cool.
Nice.
Awesome. For me, we got to go outside some this week. It finally rained and then sun came out, so we did a little yard work, got some stuff in the garden, and now it's going to go down to a hard freeze tonight at 30 degrees. So no, it doesn't suck, but it's nice to at least be outdoors again a little bit. So thankful for everything we can get. So Jay, why don't you close us out and get us out of here?
Before we shut down, Justin, tell people how to find out about you. Websites.
Sure. Well, you can go to generalsjoesreborn.com. It has the most of my G.I. Joe stuff there. JustinBellAuthor.com has links to most of my books. Or if you go to Amazon.com and just do a search for Justin Bell, you should find me there too.
All right. So that'll do it for this week. Thanks for sticking around watching this week. Next week we'll be back. Justin, thanks for coming on. It was good to talk to you again.
You guys
Good to
too.
hear that the writing has gone really well for you. So we wish you the best of luck and hope to hear more.
Fantastic. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. As for everybody else, have a good week. We will talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.